Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my friend, Mr. Erick Bzovi, who is with HealPay. How you doing today, Eric?
Great. Thanks for having us. Just trying to make it through the day, and it's good seeing you, a couple weeks ago in Vermont and getting back into the routine and, reconnecting with old faces like you.
Completely understood. I know you and I have been having conversations for, I want to say it's at least 5 or 6 years now about different ways that we can work together. And I'm glad that we're finally creating a piece of content together here.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels good. I mean, I think we've been watching you on the sidelines and seeing what you're doing with some of the media, the videos, the storytelling. It's captivating, and we embrace that here. We got a whole media team, and when I saw you in Vermont, it was cool to see you had 2 to 3 of your staff members there, and you're rolling and recording. And I'm like, who's behind all this? And then, sure enough, it's Mr. Parks. So yeah, man, definitely watching you from afar, from Michigan to Florida.
Absolutely. No. And, I appreciate that. I feel like we got a lot of good footage at the summit. I'm looking forward to getting into those videos. For those of the viewers that are not familiar with you, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got into the seat that you're in today?
It's a great question. It's a good place to start. So my name is Erick Bzovi from Southeast Michigan. Pretty much have been here my whole life, but how I started HealPay was about, geez, almost a decade ago. And just coming out of college and, having student loan debt and these things that you hear about with certain generations nowadays, you started looking at, hey, do I want to work for somebody? And, we started to, and then I said, hey, we got to start something on our own. We got to control our own destiny. So I met my co-founder, Lancelot Carlson, and he was based in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mhm.
And he was doing some consulting work, building web apps and things of that nature. And we started looking at collections, collections as an industry. In fact, it was one of our clients at this consultancy. And like I said, coming from this college experience and just seeing so many people now in their 30s have so much debt, and you start looking at it like, hey, how can we modernize this space? So we started sitting down and job shadowing at collection agencies and seeing how they handle, the process of collecting money. And it was very much what you probably still see today, or what you could expect. You would see a whiteboard, with minimum settlement authority for all the creditors that they're collecting on behalf of. And there were certain rules, like if somebody calls who owes a Chase debt or a Bank of America debt, we're able to offer 20 or 30% off. And so we started looking at that. Why can't we configure something, with code and create some logic that when a consumer logs in or, calls in, it's done automatically versus this analog way of just referencing a whiteboard, as I suggest. So we saw opportunity, and frankly, a decade later, I think the opportunity is larger. I think as things get more digitized and people start moving more online, which is happening, I think, at a clip faster than anything with COVID, just contactless everything. We're seeing massive opportunity, but we saw that as a point to start the business. And we got into building software that helps consumers or debtors pay their bills.
Which is fantastic. And I think you and I are both looking at the same thing, but from different ends of the spectrum, meaning that the consumer experience is king. My team is working on the website side and how to funnel people into the portals, and your team is working on how to improve that overall customer experience or that consumer's experience as they're working with a collection agency, which I think is really interesting. So, let me kind of pose this question to you. What can agencies be doing to improve that customer experience online?
It's a great question. I think if you can't ask the consumers, just look around, look at yourself. What are consumers doing? How can you meet the consumer at where they're at? What intersections are they at? And you start asking these questions and you look around, all ages, all generations, they're glued to their phones, right? I was just walking through a park the other day, and it's, you're in nature and you're still seeing it, but how can, you know, agencies help build products or build a system that, matches the consumer's preferences? It's meeting them where they're at, and they're online, they're on their phones. They're paying their bills online. They don't want to speak to an agent necessarily, or a stranger, you may call it, to ask them about their bill, to ask them what their balance is, to ask them how they can get out of debt. So you want to provide tools for consumers to manage their bills, to educate them, to
Mhm.
educate them on the CFPB or the regulations that govern this industry. I think if you look at your customers, or sorry, your consumers or debtors, I use those words interchangeably, as customers, as somebody who's using you as, as your business, as a service that they're obligated in this sense, but look at them as customers and how can you understand their preferences.
I like that. For me, it's always been about extending that consumer experience that they had at the bank into the debt collection arena because, they want to be able to do these self-service type things like checking their balances and negotiating a payment or whatever. But I think the more that we can provide documentation and we can provide a clean and simple user experience to where they're already familiar with it. I think the one of the challenges, especially early on, I mean, I've been building websites in the collections space or the receivables management industry for man, almost 16, 17 years now. And early on, it was it was about making the organizations look legitimate. And I think the best way to make an organization look as legitimate as it is by providing that online experience to where they can be comfortable with, hey, this is a good, clean, well designed piece of technology versus the old school one page, let me just put in some payment information and see what happens. Because I think authenticating the user and going through that process really makes them feel more comfortable because they realize that, okay, this is the right organization for me to be paying versus me just typing in my account number and hoping that I have the right collection agency, debt buyer, law firm, whatever the case may
100%.
be.
I love that. A good analogy that we all see is you Google everything, directions to something, the restaurants, the reviews. Google is a bridge to your business. And I think if you look at it that way, leverage, the search engines and how they index you and how they look at your business, because they're doing business with you. So why wouldn't you put your best foot forward? Why don't you look at, if you're a business owner, educate the consumer. Like I said, they're your customer.
Mhm.
Show them or educate them on the compliance regulations. We're beyond the point of hiding that, or just not disclosing it, because as I mentioned, everybody's going to Google it anyways. That's the first thing you do when, who is Adam Parks? I'm looking at you, I'm studying you. I mean, I'm doing my private investigation, but
Mhm.
you, so you want a presence, and consumer friendliness is something that I could talk about for hours. You can't tell, but I just think we all are consumers, and put yourself in that, in this seat or that seat. And I think it provides a win-win. It becomes a frictionless, a much less friction transaction, I would say, once they know who they're dealing with.
And one of the things that you mentioned, kind of in your opening statement was about walking through the park and everybody's plugged into their phones.
Oh
And
man,
for me, that's been a constant struggle. When we first started designing sites and software in this space, it was two different units, meaning that there was a desktop website, there was a mobile website. They were different websites, but we wrote the code to direct you based on your, locate or based on the device that you were using. And then it morphed into, I want to say probably 7, 8 years ago, it morphed into what we call responsive design, meaning that the site is the same, but it's going to automatically display itself separately based on the device that you're using. And so, what we've seen is an incredible shift. Originally, I want to say we saw kind of a minor shift on a year by year basis. One year was 30% mobile traffic, then it went to 40, then it went to 50. But since COVID started, we saw a double jump here to where over about a year, we saw the traffic split from a mobile perspective up to about 70%. And those are figures that, are not specific to our industry because that's not an overarching web development situation at the 70% traffic levels, although I'm sure it is for, some industries versus others. But for our industry and looking at the traffic from 130 sites that include debt buyers, agencies, law firms, that's what we're seeing from an aggregate basis. And how are you guys kind of addressing that?
Such a great question. And I think it's highly applicable, as you say. So, another example or use case of what you're describing is businesses were closed,
Mm,
mail rooms were shut down. Um, a lot of these firms that I work with, and I'm sure you work with, they may run their software, on-prem or on-premise, and if things aren't open, they're not open. Especially here in Michigan, we've had a lot of power outages, but
mm,
the business isn't open or accessible. That's a whole nother issue. But
sure.
um, we've been, like I said, not only meeting the customer where they're at, but you're seeing more consumers judge the business based on the options that they make available. So you probably, I always like to talk about banking apps, and
Mhm,
it's great to have your mobile app. It's better than the web app. I mean, you look at, say, a PNC's website versus PNC's mobile native app, it's better. So we've doubled down on making things more, as you call it, responsive or more friendly for the mobile or tablet user. The numbers speak for themselves. You have to meet the consumer there, and whether it's architecting the code to be responsive or looking at building a native app that can be downloaded on that device, you have to focus on that. It's where the attention is. So we have not only deployed more code to the mobile, I guess you call it code base around that, but
mhm.
also looking at all the devices they're using. So you're seeing, I know it's easy to say Android and Apple, but let's break it down to what device, what model, and let's
Mhm.
talk about how that renders the screen. Because as you know, cross browser performance is tricky, but then you start talking about the device and the operating system. And maybe I'm going way too down the rabbit hole
No,
there.
I mean, I definitely get where you're going with it. Look, different devices have different sizes. You have an iPhone 12, you have an iPhone 12 Max Pro that have different screen sizes, and you ultimately have to accommodate and account for those things. But,
Yes.
I think, in addition to that consumer experience, one of the other things that, a lot of agencies, law firms, debt buyers are using their portals and their websites for is to achieve business objectives. And that was one of the things that we were kind of talking about pre-call here is, you know, capturing consent and actually achieving that business objective, because there's a risk level with sending out notifications without consent to communicate through that channel. And what does that look like? And kind of how have you guys addressed that or any other, business requirement or business objective through the portal itself?
Great question. So, achieving consent can only be achieved if you can, I call it achieve and verify that end user.
Mhm,
So, from a third party disclosure, we make sure that the consumer identifies who they are, verifies it, and then at that point, they're able to consent to the preferences of how they want to be communicated with.
mhm,
So, it's very important, and I suggest we're using HealPay or not, but if you're a firm, is to not only track, those preferences,
mhm,
but give them the ability to set preferences of how they want to be communicated with, and also the restrictions of when they don't want to be communicated with. So you have to have tools, but you could look at it simply as a web form. They've already acknowledged and consent or agreed this is who they are.
mhm,
And so then let them specify when I want to be contacted, how I want to be contacted, even down to, hey, can you call me at this time? We see a lot of web apps like Calendly or, that allows you to schedule the call.
mhm.
That's a beautiful thing. But you see, you're catering in or ushering in more consumer friendliness. But you have to do it through technology, and you have to keep in mind, like I think you're kind of touching upon, is the audit purposes, the compliance purposes. You have to store the information. You have to give the consumer back what they agreed to. So
Mhm.
there's a lot to talk about there. But we all see it when you upload, you know, your iOS, and you get, you see 50 pages of terms and conditions, but you're getting a copy of it. Now, make sure you read it, but that's the idea, is
Mhm.
give them options, let them agree to that, and let them opt out of it, if things change. But that's where you need to be. You need to give consumers the ability to specify um, how they would like to be contacted, within something, that's legitimate and not ridiculous. We're not going to call you at midnight, but within the framework of the FDCPA and what the CFPB is rolling out here in November.
Completely understood. No, and I agree with everything that you're saying, which is why we're going to find more ways to be working together. But just for the fun of it, I want to approach one more kind of polarizing topic in the industry as it relates to payments, and kind of get your thoughts on it. So I'm going to kind of keep my opinions to myself on this one, but I want to hear kind of how do you feel about the convenience fee battle? We've got two different camps here. One saying convenience fees are okay. The other one saying convenience fees shouldn't be charged. And kind of how do you view the problem, regardless of kind of opinion, but how do you view the problem and how have you helped others to kind of find the right solution for them?
Great question. And try to be on both sides. I always try to listen to both sides to see, what's the most objective way to do it. But I always start with it's the nomenclature, but the word itself, convenience fees. I think it's interesting. Who is it convenient for?
It's a
You
good
know,
question.
yeah, it's a great question, and
Great
it
question.
could have both answers. It could be for truthfully, I think it's both parties.
Mhm.
The business or the merchant prefers 9 out of 10 times to be paid electronically, and the consumer prefers to pay electronically.
Mhm.
Both get digital receipts. Both get confirmation. This check is in the mail. But the point is, paying online or electronically is convenient. This
Mhm.
convenience fee model, which is really a derivative of merchant services, I call it. It's a way to charge or pass on the fee that Visa, MasterCard, all the issuing banks, what they charge the merchant. And let's just say 3%. That's the
Mhm.
cost to swipe a card. So there's a new model coming up. It's not really a new model, it's really repackaged. And so I think you'll start hearing what my opinion is here. But you're seeing businesses explore offering offering convenience fee model to consumers. And what that means is the consumer will pay that fee. Again, say it's 3%. So they're going to be passed on a fee that they typically bear, which could be looked at as the cost of doing business, but they're passing it on to the consumer. And there's different models of that. So the model that most are familiar with, I believe, would be, oh, the merchant, XYZ agency is going to charge $3 on top of $100 balance or principal. So
Mhm.
now the consumer is going to pay, $103. But there's a new model that you're seeing growing is where the payment processor, not the agency, is charging that fee.
Mhm.
And that's what seems to be more prevailing. It's rife with issues though. There's state laws, there's card brand laws, there's the FDCPA, and I'm not going to give a legal opinion. And this is where I always back up. Do you want to charge your users or customers, as I called them earlier, an ancillary fee or an additional fee that truthfully is more, beneficial for you to accept that payment method electronically? Like, do you want to do that?
Mhm.
It could be a cost saving exercise, but are you tarnishing your brand? At what cost are you doing that? And why are you doing that? That's the discussion. And so I fall back, and HealPay falls back on this mantra. We're trying to be a consumer friendly company. We're trying to help consumers, you know, pay their bill or get their balance or make it frictionless as possible and less disclaimers. And so that goes contra to charging a fee. So I could
Mhm.
confidently say, we're not advocates of it. The merchant ultimately decides, what they want to do, what vendors they select. But I would just ask businesses in this space, why are you doing it? Do you need to be doing it? Can the software tools that the consumer is engaging in, can it provide other tools? For instance, checking your balance or setting up a recurring payment. Um,
Mhm.
those functions, Adam, are doing things beyond just swiping the card or the transaction. So therefore, look at that as a cost of doing business. You're able to provide tools, in
Mhm.
this case, an online payment portal or an IVR, that does so much more than just process a payment. So I think we're living in a world, the CFPB is here, it's been here, and their whole idea and notion is to protect consumers. And I think it goes against some of that logic. But again, there are multiple derivatives and multiple opinions on it. So I love
There'll
to hear what
always
you
be
think.
new creative ways that people are going to kind of approach the convenience fee situation. But, It is a polarizing topic, and I think it's worth, organizations at least considering if they are or are not, why not? And I think that taking that step back that you're doing with a client while you're having that discussion is a really important part of the process, because I think that's ultimately how you find the right conclusion for yourself, for your organization. And I think that's really the key.
Well said. The last analogy I would say on this topic is you go to a gas station one or gas station two. One charges a surcharge, they call it in the card present world. Are you less likely or more likely to go to the gas station that doesn't charge that fee?
Mhm.
Of course. It's a little different dynamic with collection firms, but it resonates. It's what's
Yeah.
the perception?
It definitely makes a difference. So I'm curious to see how that evolves over the coming months, and maybe we'll have to do a follow up video here in
Yeah.
the future. But for now, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and have a chat with me. I feel like we covered, some really powerful information today and some valuable content. For those of you that are watching, if you have any additional topics that you'd like to see us cover or guests that you'd like to see me interview, feel free to comment below. Eric and I will both be responding to the comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So we're always happy to start a conversation based on these videos. But Eric, I really want to appreciate you just for coming on here. It was great to see you at the ARM AI Summit, and I look forward to seeing you again at one of the other events coming up in the next few months.
The feeling is mutual, man. We can't wait to see you, and we'll be talking more and working together. So I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to seeing you in person again and in the flesh like we just did. So thank you.
Awesome. We'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Take care.